My name is Kim Osborne, and I'm the Executive Secretary for Integral Development at the Organization of American States, and it's a great pleasure to welcome all of you. Honorable Daryl Vaz, Minister of Science, Energy, and Technology of Jamaica, and Chair of the Inter-American Committee on Science and Technology, His Excellency Luis Almagro, Secretary General of the Organization of American States, Ambassador Frank Mora, Permanent Representative of the United States to the OAS, ambassadors and permanent representatives to the OAS, permanent observers, Ms. Maria Cecilia Sleiman, Deputy Secretary for Science, Technology, and Innovation Policy, the Ministry of Science, Technology, and Innovation of Argentina, Dr. Maria McNutt, President of the U.S. Academy of the National Academy of Sciences, Dr. Lindsay Gorman, Senior Fellow in Emerging Technologies, German Marshall Fund, Alliance for Security and Democracy, Dr. Dewey Murdoch, Director, Center for Security and Emerging Technologies at Georgetown University, Ms. Evelyn Miller, Vice President of Meta, and Mr., I'm missing somebody's name. I'm sorry. I have the preliminary list here. I apologize. And Mr. Robert Blair, Senior National Security and Emerging Technologies of Microsoft. My apologies. I am most grateful to establish protocol for today and officially welcome all of you to the high-level roundtable on policy on artificial intelligence, public policy imperatives in the Americas. I owe special thanks to Dr. Marcia McNutt and her team at the National Academy of Sciences for partnering with us, the Secretariat for Integral Development, in hosting this morning's dialogue, and for your ongoing support to our work in science and technology and innovation for many years. In 2021, member states of the OAS, Ministers of Science, Technology, and Innovation adopted the Declaration of Jamaica under the theme, Harnessing the Power of Transformative Technologies to Move Our Communities Forward. This was done recognizing that our region lags behind many around the world in the adoption of these technologies. In adopting the Declaration of Jamaica, member states also recognized the need to work collectively to channel the benefits of these technologies in a responsible manner, minimizing the negative effects on communities while capitalizing on their power for the equitable and sustainable socioeconomic development of our societies. We know that despite the tremendous potential that artificial intelligence brings and the speed at which it is being deployed across the hemisphere calls for regional dialogue to coordinate policies, regulations, and programs to address the risks and leverage the potential benefits, which is what we hope to achieve this morning. By gathering leaders from across the region in a coordinated effort to discuss AI policy, we hope to begin the process of better understanding what a policy or regulatory framework for developing artificial intelligence in the Americas might look like. Today, we will hear from our esteemed panelists as they discuss their understanding of AI's complex, multifaceted landscape and debate its role in promoting sustainable development. You will hear them exchange ideas on what guardrails might be needed to regulate AI's social, economic, and security ramifications, and you will hear them explain how community concerns can be central to AI policy in OAS member states. Our hope is that the collective wisdom and expertise will help us to shape the way forward for positive AI development and deployment across the hemisphere. To begin our proceedings and to declare this session open, I would like to welcome to the podium His Excellency Luis Almagro, Secretary General of the Organization of American States, for his opening remarks. Secretario, you have the floor.
Dear friends, we gather today to discuss one of the most critical topics of our time, the impact of artificial intelligence on our societies and how best to prepare for and respond to the emergency of this technology. The OES is keenly aware that generative artificial intelligence and the technologies behind supercharged neural network impact the four fundamental pillars of the OES: development, democracy, human rights, and security. In terms of its economic impact and its potential for development, Goldman Sachs research estimates that generative artificial intelligence can result in a 7% growth in global GDP and improve productivity by 1.5 percentage points over the next decade. Building the right ecosystems, countries of the Americas can benefit significant numbers of people and communities by providing fast-track access to solutions and new business and career, economic, or social conditions. Other concerns relate to the right of privacy, the ability to work, and the potential to affect underrepresented groups using artificial intelligence tools as decision-making mechanisms to provide public services or administer judicial systems. All these issues have been dominating news cycles over the past few months, and so we are aware of these revolutionary technologies are already having profound effects on everyday lives. It is therefore timely for us to engage in a meaningful review of the current and potential challenges for OES member states, the policy implications and the constructive engagement of all sectors which is necessary as we chart a way forward. I would like to highlight a few issues that are fundamental for collaboration with the OES member states. First, deliberate efforts are required to avoid leaving countries and communities behind from the opportunity to leverage artificial intelligence and transformative technology to improve lives. There is a technology, economic, and social gap in the Americas, both between and within countries, and further evidenced by the effects of generative artificial intelligence. While the deployment of the technology may be global, solutions must fit national contexts, which may vary from one local to the other. The technology will not remain static and constant. Learning and collaboration are imperative, together with collective analysis and the sharing of good practices and lessons learned. We will need to set up regional and national mechanisms to install the ability to craft, review, and adapt policies, principles, guidelines, regulations, and solutions to address ongoing effects of artificial intelligence as it relates to security and institutional stability of countries. Understanding the technology and its dynamic evolution will help countries to build trust, design and set up effective and efficient oversight to safeguard their institutions. Artificial intelligence and other transformative technologies offer a unique opportunity to drive science-based solutions to existential threats for countries related to climate change, disaster risk management, access to food, water, energy, and health. It is upon all of us to seize the opportunity through smart policies, timely investment, and partnerships. Transformative intelligence technologies offered to our people and communities in the Americas. The OES is committed to supporting member states in these efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Secretary General Almagro. It is now my pleasure to welcome to the stage Ms. Marcia McNutt, President of the National Academy of Sciences.
Thank you, Secretary General Almagro, for those wonderful opening remarks and challenge to all of us for this meeting today. As you heard, I'm Marcia McNutt. I have the honor of leading the U.S. National Academy of Sciences, and it is a real pleasure to be invited to participate in these proceedings today. We also are very pleased at the Academy for our partnership with the OAS on this important convening to discuss policy implications of the AI revolution, which is coming upon us at great speed. I would like to start with a basic definition of artificial intelligence that comes from a report of the National Academy of Sciences. AI is the simulation of human intelligence processes by machines. A very simple definition. In general, AI systems work by ingesting a whole lot of training data, analyzing that data for correlations and patterns, and then using these patterns to make predictions. The newest creator to emerge from the information age is something called generative AI. Algorithms such as ChatGPT actually create new content, including audio, video, images, text, simulation, and even computer codes. This ability is drastically changing content generation in the digital space. You can imagine what can happen with this, that someone could search the web, find lectures I've given, and re-content that with words and sentences that completely change what I originally spoke about. But this also can represent a great opportunity for us if we can overcome these challenges. As stewards of our societies, we in the policy space have a responsibility to seek a deeper and better understanding of how these technologies could impact our societies. We see some calls and some nations actually moving to ban AI tools as policymakers, governments, and scientists try to make sense of these rapidly developing technologies. This is a challenge we'll face, which seems scary to some people, and we must replace that with a positive focus on how science and an evidence-based approach can impact and even benefit the creation and expansion of such tools. Think back 100 years. At that point, it was difficult to imagine electricity within our homes. At that point, this wild new technology had the capacity of killing people through electrocution, burning our homes down, hurting our animals. But the scientific community got together. They developed protective coatings, which are on all of our plugs, a set of standards, such as Underwriters Laboratory, and practices that bring electricity to our home to the point where we cannot live without it. And the benefits definitely outweigh the challenges. To give you a more recent example, I remember when I started graduate school about 50 years ago, electronic calculators were first coming out. And there were people who wanted to ban the use of electronic calculators. They were concerned that students would no longer learn mathematics. Well, I'll tell you, 50 years later now, I can still solve a differential equation, but I'm really happy I've got that calculator when I'm balancing my checkbook. It makes fewer mistakes than I would. These examples illustrate that we've faced these challenges before and have been able to come up with solutions to harness the power of technology and minimize the downside. In just 2015, we at the Academies co-hosted a series of conversations with the Chinese Academy of Sciences and UK's Royal Society. The topic of these conversations was human genome editing, another scary technology. A few months ago, we hosted the third summit in this series. These conversations looked at the scientific, medical, ethical, and governance issues associated with advances in human genome editing research and came up with policies and guidelines to help this new technology not go in bad directions. And we even saw the Chinese government sanction a scientist who went around and avoided these safeguards. Bringing together policymakers, civil society, and tech companies is key to moving forward with scientific benefits that could come from AI, while heeding the warnings of some of its creators on the potential blowback. As the upcoming discussions consider what governments can do in the policy space, and how to advance benefits of AI while protecting society's vulnerable citizens, an important factor will be critical to what comes next. That's the role of collaboration and partnerships. That's what we're about. By working together across sectors globally, we can find transparent mechanisms and accountable policies to bring positive change in everything from disaster preparedness and climate change response to job growth and workforce development. I would encourage all of us to work with academies, in-country experts to have a better understanding of the challenges and opportunities in your specific country and in your specific region. We at the academies remain steady and available to continue collaborating on these and other pressing issues. I'd like again to thank our hosts at the OAS and everyone involved in making today's event possible, and I look forward to the panel discussion. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, President McNutt, for those words. We hope to continue our partnership with you. And so I'm very happy to bring this portion of today's session to a close and now move to our panel. To begin, I would like to introduce our moderator for today's session, Ambassador Frank Maurer, U.S. Permanent Representative to the OAS. Ambassador Maurer, prior to his current position, he was Professor of Politics and International Relations and Senior Researcher of the Jack D. Gordon Institute for Public Policy at Florida International University. From 2013 to 2020, Ambassador Maurer served as Director of the Kimberly Green Latin American and Caribbean Center at FIU. Prior to arriving at FIU, he served as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Defense for Western Hemisphere from 2009 to 2013. He has held several teaching positions in various universities, and so it is my distinct pleasure, Ambassador, to thank you for joining us today and hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. And I want to just thank the chair, Kim Osborne, the Executive Secretary for Integral Development here at the OAS for convening this meeting and for her leadership of the Secretariat. Now, as you heard from the Secretary General and Dr. McNutt, today's topic is crucially important as artificial intelligence has rapidly evolved in both its complexity and its potential applications. AI, as you also heard, has the potential to be an essential tool for our region's economic growth, health, and well-being, solutions to global challenges, and of course, for the protection of our democratic values. Now, without proper safeguards, however, it also poses a significant risk. The United States is committed to a future where emerging technologies like AI increase the security and prosperity and reinforce the values of the American people and like-minded democracies. That is why, as part of our regional agenda for digital transformation that leaders of the hemisphere adopted at the Summit of the Americas held in June of last year, we committed, and I want to quote directly from the document, quote, "The responsible and ethical development and use of artificial intelligence systems and other transformative technologies while protecting individual privacy and personal data and promoting equity and respect for human rights and inclusive growth," end of quote. It is clear that we need to build on this commitment to develop frameworks or comprehensive frameworks for the responsible development of AI technologies. And so we are here to address these both opportunities and these challenges with an excellent set of speakers, panelists, who will be addressing, as I said, these topics, and we're very fortunate to have them. Let me just say what the run of the show is today and how we're going to proceed. I will ask, after I introduce each of them, I will ask each panelist to give some brief remarks, 3 minutes. 3 minutes. I won't interrupt, but 3 minutes, please. To briefly, as I said, make introductory thoughts on artificial intelligence. And then we'll move to a guided discussion, a conversatorio, as we say in Spanish. And then after that, we will open up to the audience for your questions and interventions. So let me introduce the panelists in the order in which they will be speaking for their 3 minutes. First, Daryl Vaz, here sitting to my right, Minister of Science, Energy, and Technology of the government of Jamaica. Before his current appointment, Minister Vaz was the minister in charge of land, environment, climate change, and investment portfolios at the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. He has a long and distinguished career in public service. He will be followed by Dr. Lindsay Gorman, who is a senior fellow for emerging technologies at the German Marshall Fund's Alliance for Securing Democracy, where she leads the work on US-China technology competition, focusing on efforts of AI, quantum information, 5G, and advanced telecommunications. Dr. Lindsay will be followed by Cecilia Slyman, who is on my left. She is Deputy Secretary for Science, Technology, and Innovation Policy in the government of Argentina. Ms. Slyman is, as I said, an expert on these issues. Prior to her current appointment, she worked as coordinator of the National Program for the Federalization of Highly Qualified Human Resources and Research Professionals for Local Development. She also worked as a project manager in the Education Office of the OAS. Thank you for being here with us. Then Evelyn Miller, who is the Vice President of Privacy and Data Policy at Meta. Previously to their current position, she was overseeing all legal functions for NGP Television and Magazine, while also serving as primary legal counsel for National Geographic Senior Management. Then Dr. Dewey Murdoch, he's director of the Georgetown University Center for Security and Emerging Technologies, a policy research organization that provides decision makers with data-driven analysis on the security implications of emerging technologies. And last, but of course certainly not least, Robert Blair, who is the Senior Director, National Security and Emerging Technology at Microsoft. Mr. Blair, prior to joining the private sector, had an extensive career in federal service. He served as Director of the Office of Policy and Strategic Planning within the Office of the Secretary of Commerce, where he worked on telecommunications, semiconductors, and other technologies. Please join me in welcoming our panelists to this discussion. So with that, Minister Vaz, you have the floor for 3 minutes. Whatever you like.
Easy. Thank you very much. Good morning to you, ladies and gentlemen. And let me just say, in the interest of time, all protocols observed. I'm indeed honored to participate in this roundtable policy dialogue addressing artificial intelligence and its related public policy imperatives for the Americas. In this particular discussion, I wear two hats. On one hand, as a current chair of COMSIP, I'm here to foster a general debate on how the region is and will continue to be impacted by AI. However, in my role as Minister of Science, Energy, and Technology in Jamaica, it would be remiss of me not to offer some perspective on the specific impact of AI on small and developing economies like Jamaica and other islands in the Caribbean. Despite the explosion of public discussion about the rise of AI, Artificial intelligence is nothing new. Many of the technologies on which we depend for work, education, or even leisure are facilitated by AI and have been around for some time. What is relatively new and has generated considerable interest and concern globally, however, is the increased access to advanced AI tools like ChatGPT and the potential positive or negative effects on the widespread use. Education is one of the sectors with the most concern about AI. Students, as always do, have already found clever ways to use AI technology to make their courses easier by using it to write term papers and even dissertations. One of the responses to this development has been to ban ChatGPT in some school districts. The concerns raised by educators in this regard are indeed genuine. However, I posit that these technologies may hold more possibilities to advance or even revolutionize education and how we teach than to harm it. During the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, we shuttered all schools, effectively grinding the education sector to a temporary halt. What followed was a mad dash to transform our 19th century style classrooms and schools into technologically enabled institutions. The transition was never easy or smooth, as most schools still use physical books and chalkboards to teach. Many parents didn't even have an email address or devices to facilitate online learning. As time passed, we learned how to manage the situation better. The same argument that AI can help advance education is also valid for many other sectors, including manufacturing, healthcare, finance, and transportation. Speaking for the Caribbean region, our nationals immigrate for opportunities and achieve incredible feats across the globe, proving that what we lack is not the capacity but the infrastructure to nurture their greatness. Artificial intelligence can help us to change that. As a region with an incredible potential for growth, we need not to discuss banning or restricting, but instead coexisting and benefiting from AI. With that, I'll cut my comments short to keep within the 3-minute timeline and set the right example. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I had 10 minutes.
Thank you so much, Minister. Dr. Gorman.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation to appear with this distinguished panel on a topic of great importance today. I'm Lindsay Gorman from the Alliance for Securing Democracy, where we study the impact of emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence on democratic systems, values, and institutions. And I'd like to start my comments today by borrowing an analogy from quantum physics. My training is as a quantum physicist, and we have this concept of more is different. And in the quantum physics sense, it means that we can use the laws of electrodynamics to very precisely explain the motion of one electron orbiting in an atom. And we're okay also when we add one more electron in there, and we can precisely describe the motion of these electrons. But once we add 3, 4, 5, the problem becomes intractable. And what that means is that when we have the orders of magnitudes of electrons and particles operating in everyday materials, we get phenomena that we can't describe from first principles, that we can't understand by simply writing and solving the equations. And I think we're seeing something similar happen today with data and artificial intelligence, where the systems that are being developed, ChatGPT is a great example, are not fully explainable necessarily by the amassing of the data. President McNutt mentioned that these systems are trained on massive quantities of information. And just like the electrons in our metals and our semiconductors and our atoms, we're reaching the point where by training these billions and orders of magnitudes, 10 to the 23rd quantities of data, Avogadro's number, just like in chemistry, we're getting these phenomena that we can't quite explain. And so what that means, I think, for the future of democracy, the future of national security, and of international cooperation really involves what I would say are kind of three dichotomies. One of them we've heard already today, this question of opportunities versus risks. The IDB in 2019 put out a study talking about the tremendous opportunity, the economic opportunity to Latin America and the Caribbean by 2030 from technologies like AI. There's an incredible amount of opportunity in healthcare, in fighting disease, in climate change, in better governance systems. And there are also obviously incredible risks. I think one that the advent of ChatGPT and large language models has really woken us up to is the threat of disinformation and of manipulated images that we struggle to see fact from fiction. The second dichotomy I would put to your attention is a dichotomy between regulating and creating. And as policymakers and people thinking about these topics, we can do two things. We can control against harms, but we can also set a positive direction for what we do want, in addition to trying to control what we don't want. And so there's a dual role, I think, for government and for regulation here. And then I would say the third real dichotomy that we're looking at is a question of the applicability of existing laws versus the need to create new laws. The ChatGPT ban that we saw in Italy that was alluded to earlier was a question of applying existing laws, data protection, copyright law. To what extent will those laws be applicable in this age of AI? And to what extent do we need to fashion new laws to control against the harms, to envision what we want these technologies to accomplish? So I will conclude with those three and look forward to the conversation.
Deputy Secretary.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I'm the only non-English speaker, so you'll have to be patient with me. It is a pleasure to be here again. I used to work here more than 10 years ago, so a long time ago, in the SEDI as well. In Argentina now, from our Minister of Science and Technology, we are looking at all these new technologies coming from mainly developed countries, and it poses a challenge to all our public policies regarding our job creation and job destruction, also creating new laws, regulating what's coming from other countries, and as well developing new technologies in Argentina. We have a big platform of researchers and institutions that really make a difference in the world and create value, but we also need to think about what this new technology is for us and how it affects in our everyday life. So we think we as a society, and especially in developing countries, we need, as we did for the COVID and the vaccines, we need to state some strong agreements and standards to say, well, what we want and what we don't want from this technology to affect us. Do we want to replace all the jobs we can? Do we want to replace our education, our teachers, our institutions, or how do we want our society to be? So we first need to decide what kind of society we want to be, and then we need to introduce this technology and think how we want to regulate. And We are now in Argentina, we are creating a high-level network on IA where we are sitting together academy experts, private sector, government, civil society to discuss all these things and create new laws and what we need to welcome and develop these new technologies. So thank you very much. And looking forward to the discussion. I won't be standing again.
So luckily I wrote down my statement, otherwise I'd be here for way more than 3 minutes. Well, it's all been timed, so I think we should be okay. So I'm Evelyn Miller. I'm at Meta Platforms. My focus is public policy, specifically in the area of privacy and data. And as you can imagine, AI is a tricky space for us right now. And as you know, Mr. Vaz mentioned earlier, AI has been part of our business model for a very long time. But how it's evolving and changing publicly and being used openly is what's changing for us. The challenges raised by AR are new territory for a lot of folks, and it's still emerging, so how we regulate is still an important point. Meta is prioritizing building AI responsibly and has been for several years. We have interdisciplinary teams focusing on a variety of topics related to responsible AI, including fairness, transparency, privacy, robustness, and governance, with a mission of carrying out our company mission of bringing communities together, people together, and creating benefit for individuals. I'm excited about some of the work that is underway on AI accountability, which will involve working with external experts to look at how the whole AI community can keep improving and delivering in this area. Sometimes teams like this in industry are more theoretical, but at Meta, we're applying this work to our core products while innovating new ways to address important challenges and sharing those approaches publicly so others can benefit from it. AI can raise novel privacy and security concerns, much of which we've already heard. In particular, things around face and speech recognition and other AI-driven technologies that make use of sensitive information have driven a great deal of privacy concern among policymakers and the public. But AI can also create new opportunities for protecting privacy, which is why we are heavily investing in research around privacy-preserving machine learning technologies like differential privacy, federated learning, and encrypted computation, and teaching the AI community how to deploy them in their own platforms. Anything that we develop will go through the same rigorous privacy review process as all of our other products and be subject to the same independent oversight and accountability. As with other emerging technologies, we believe proactive regulation of AI is necessary. Given that AI is still a nascent technology in many ways, there are a few things that any regulation on AI must consider to ensure that it is effective. First, it should be built upon existing legislation. It should be principle-based. Rather than codifying inflexible rules, regulators should focus on supporting and building on ongoing efforts to establish best practices in the fields of responsible AI. It should also be underpinned by a risk-based approach focused on most sensitive types of AI applications and sectors. It should be technology neutral, and it should be a product of collaboration amongst multiple stakeholders making use of the many different kinds of experts across the AI ecosystem. In particular, regulatory sandboxes to foster the development of new products and services within existing regulatory frameworks and policy prototyping programs as methods to test future laws and regulatory frameworks instruments on AI and other emerging technologies. I think I will leave it there since I've given us a lot of ideas on how we could regulate and turn it to my peer.
Dr. Martin.
Good morning. My name is Dewey, and I'm curious, who has used ChatGPT, generative models already? Okay, so if you have used Midjourney or even GitHub's Copilot or any of these text generation tools, I think we're all in agreement. We are seeing a pretty substantial change. I used to fund research from the federal government when I worked, it's amazing the capabilities that we're seeing. I would have flipped out if my performers of the teams had been able to develop the kind of capabilities we have right now. So this is a major change where we're seeing new technologies, where it's a huge step forward. And with the increased access, which is a big step that we've just seen, now hundreds of millions of people can brainstorm, explore productivity changes, and entertain themselves in ways that are fundamentally different. This awareness is fundamentally changing the discussion now, hence probably partly this meeting today. These changes have caught the attention of governments and policymakers and decision makers around the world because they believe, and I think rightly so, that it has the potential to change soft and hard power balance. How governments operate, and it gives actors that had previously not had dominant capabilities, it could totally change what they can do. We've seen this in the geopolitical power dynamics, so like supply chains. During the pandemic, we saw a very difficult time where you couldn't get everything from baby formula to computer chips for your cars. We now are very keenly aware of what the supply chains can do to future capabilities. It's a lever of government or individual or corporate capabilities. We've seen how extremely important talent is to any kind of advancement. The competition for the best and brightest, and also seeing how to develop education systems and that raise general awareness as well as specific STEM talent is an extremely important part. You see this with immigration issues. Export controls, you see countries, US primarily, attempting to exert control and limit its adversaries' access to core technologies. This is done for a variety of reasons, which we'll talk about potentially. But sometimes this desire of decoupling or limiting partners is done out of concern about human rights issues. Sometimes it's limiting unwanted tech transfer. Other times it's just trying to make sure our citizens have the capabilities they need to do what is important for life. So, where do we go? I think the framing that I find most useful is thinking about it from a human-machine teaming and trust framework. If you've ever worked with the military or firefighters or anyone who is motivated by training, and it's a training culture, you work with your fellow soldiers or firefighters, you train so much that you don't even have to look left or right. You know exactly what they're going to do. You understand how they're going to operate. When there's a crisis or a high-stress situation, you know what's going to happen. In AI, I think we have the opportunity to understand how we can develop human-machine teams that are trusted. You know when you can trust the AI system to help you, and you know when you can't trust the AI system. Obviously, it's going to be dynamic, but this is the part, I think this motif, it represents the future. Both my dreams as well as my nightmares focus around this human-machine teaming. And we'll get into some of those in some of the questions, but I think how we team, how we trust, how we cultivate that, maintain it, or how that trust is abused is really the way we're going forward. So what do we do? Well, unfortunately, my 3 minutes are up, so we'll have to leave that to the discussion. Looking forward to it.
Well, good morning, everybody. Once again, I'm Robert Blair. I'm Senior Director for Emerging Tech and National Security at Microsoft. And I really hate going last because this is such an incredible group of people, and the insights they've already given us have really taken all my talking points. So I'm going to still hit some of the highlights, and then I'm going to recap a couple of the things, because what we're hearing is almost a unification of ideas. There's a common set of themes which almost everybody up here has already started talking about. And while I'm frustrated my speech is no longer really relevant, I'm really encouraged that there's so much that we can build upon as a group, as a conversation, to move AI in a direction that is going to lead to, hopefully, great benefit for society and the ability to minimize negative impacts on society as well. So I think I've got the best job in the world. I work at one of the best innovators who is working on an underlying bedrock of principles that I have spent my entire career trying to protect and support. We believe deeply that technology developers and deployers need to work from a perspective of building responsible applications. And I work on quantum, I work on artificial intelligence, I work on 5G and XG. Everything that we do needs to be built upon this idea that what we do matters, and everybody in the technology stack has a role to play, whether you're a technology provider or a government or a father sitting around the dinner table with my kids. We have to be looking at how these technologies are impacting society and find the roles that each one of us can play to ensure that those impacts on society are what we want them to be, that we're building the sort of society that we want our children and their children to inherit. So why is this such an amazing time to work in technology? AI is truly leading a revolution. It is changing every sector and every industry that we're involved in. That doesn't mean that what we're looking at is an easy path. While it holds great potential for good, there's also reasonable concerns. And I want to spend a lot of time today, not in my 3 minutes, talking about what some of those concerns are and how we can deal with them. What I found in having these conversations is that as we begin to get more specific in what those concerns are, solutions begin to develop themselves. Often there are already rules and regulations and laws in place that can deal with many of those concerns. Sometimes there are not, and we should be having a conversation as a society about how to deal with those. But this amorphous concern about AI is often dispelled to a large extent once we begin to talk about it. And at Microsoft, what we do, and to build upon what my previous speaker said, we are developing co-pilots. We're developing tools that people can use to make their lives better. Now, there are those who will take these tools and use them for bad. There are criminals, there are nation states that don't necessarily share our same values, who can use those same tools for very bad purposes. We have laws in place to protect against criminal applications, and we have government-to-government relationships, as well as technology-to-government relationships that need to be used to leverage those issues as well. And I probably was my 3-minute warning. Was that my 3-minute warning there? No, you sure? All right. I want to just hit 2 or 3 positive sectors where AI is currently being used, and then I'll wrap up quickly. We are thrilled to see, and this is something that's very personal to me, the positive impacts on healthcare and education. I come from a part of the United States where people still don't know how to read in some cases, where access to healthcare can be very, very difficult. And so quality healthcare can be very, very difficult. AI is already being used where I come from in the Midwest to improve healthcare outcomes by using AI to review things like mammograms, to review things like radiograms, to see where there might be anomalies that then human doctors can come in and provide updated diagnoses, and there are already improved outcomes for patients. Within education, it's breaking down barriers between technology and those who have differing learning capabilities, those who are autistic or those who need different types of vocabulary because of the way their particular minds work. AI is already beginning to break down those barriers and helping to close that digital divide. And those who, frankly, don't know how to read are beginning to use technology in ways because of both translation, voice to text and text to voice. Illiterate farmers in India or the Midwest or in South America can access technology tools in ways they never could in the past. So the possibilities for AI we're only beginning to see. But it's important to keep in mind we're still at a very early stage in the development and discovery of this technology, and there are still incredible questions to be answered. The only way we're going to do this is as a community, and frankly, I spend more of my time listening in these situations than I do in talking. So I'm looking forward to spending the next hour or so learning from you all about the concerns that you have, the possibilities that you see, so that at Microsoft we can take these learnings back, we can improve our products, we can improve our discussions with governments and with our technology partners around the world, and hopefully, not hopefully, we will use this knowledge so that over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to be building the sort of AI-enabled world that's going to make life better for us all, while minimizing the possibilities of people using this technology to do harm. So I will stop with that for right now. Thank you, OAS, for putting this together. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to learning. Thank you.
Well, it's time for the conversation and opportunity to drill down on some of the issues and questions raised by our panelists, and I want to thank the panelists for keeping themselves to the 3-minute rule. So thank you very much. Before we start, I want to fail to mention something at the very beginning that from the webcast, and I want to join all those who are here with us virtually through webcast in the different capitals throughout the Western Hemisphere. Welcome to this discussion. Glad you're able to be here and to have access to this discussion. So let me, there's a lot of ground to cover, even before I heard the panelists, so there's even more now. So I'm gonna see if I can, how I manage. Let me ask a general question, panelists, and I'll let any of them sort of try. And of course, many have talked about ChatGPT and the impact that it's having. And I want to sort of focus on that, maybe drill down on that particular question. As you all have mentioned, this technology is still in its earliest stages. And few companies are using the most, I think, advanced AI tools, and even few are developing sophisticated models like the one that underpins ChatGPT. Now, particularly looking at this region, but if you like, you can expand it beyond the region. How should governments and businesses think about expanding access to this technology? How can they partner to provide the positives of this particular tool to as many people as possible? I'm not going to pick on anybody, but if there's anybody who wants to jump in and then sort of react to one another, that would be great. So I open the floor for that question. Robert?
I was getting the eyeball. I saw
Okay.
that. Okay. I think the most immediate way to partner is through skilling initiatives. And through skilling initiatives. So at the application level, of course, we are discovering, and our partners are discovering, new ways of using AI every day. And to be able to share those ideas with the coders and developers who are able to actually take the ideas and make them into effect relies upon having the necessary coders and developers and the number of them necessary to move from idea to innovation. That, at this point, though that body of skill, that skill set, the body of workers, is still largely localized within the developed world. It's just a matter of fact. That is changing, though. And Microsoft and our colleagues across industry are partnering with OAS's sister organization, IDB, to improve connectivity and skilling initiatives on AI all around the world, all around South and Central America. We're also working to develop our own skill sets, our own, through LinkedIn and Microsoft. We are developing AI-enabled skills that are being made available around the world for those who want to learn about AI, who want to become certified and licensed in AI applications and coding, and then can use that training to build careers around it. So while many people are interested in how do we use AI today, I think it's as important to discuss how can we use AI to build the sort of economy and societies of tomorrow in cooperation between multinationals, governments, and industry.
Yes. It's on.
It's on? Oh, okay. Yes, I think in our countries we have this double trouble, and that to create and to train new teachers and new students that become then researchers, that they are the ones that develop these new technologies, because wages are not that good for the public sector or for the teachers, and then the teachers go to the private sector and to the private sector abroad. They work for companies outside from Argentina, and then students too, that they don't finish their education, their grad education or university, and then they start working for companies abroad, and we need to create new incentives for them to stay in academy or to stay in working on creating new companies that can provide new or add value to their work, and not that the students or the workers only have their working force to sell, but that they can create new products, new services that create more value for economies and societies. Besides teaching and making more accessible these new technologies.
Thank you. I'm looking at you, Evelyn.
Yeah, okay. All right, great. So I think, the way that Meta has addressed this issue of access is to release large language models to a select group of researchers at different parts of the world where they can leverage the use of that AI for the benefit of their communities, their cities, their countries. And I think the idea is to give that kind of access to grow and develop the AI technology regionally. That sounds, sorry, are you guys hearing me okay? Because it sounds a little weird. Okay. We've also put out frameworks, AI frameworks, where we've had here in the United States, where we've had over 150,000 projects attached to it. So creating open source materials and releasing them in responsible ways that can help build out more AI, more projects, is one of the ways that Meta goes about making AI accessible around the globe.
Let me ask another question, a broad question for all of you. Recently, the Google CEO, Sundar Pichai, warned in a 60 Minutes interview that strong regulations would be needed to avoid the harmful effects of AI. In particular, he noted that laws that safeguard its advances would not be, and he quote, for a company to decide, end of quote. So I guess my question then is, who do you believe will ultimately determine AI's future trajectory? Go with Minister and then with...
So I think AI's future direction certainly cannot be determined by one party. I think the possibilities are endless. Therefore, careful management of this trajectory is absolutely important. Collaborating among the various stakeholders, therefore involving the opinions of governments and other companies, will be very, very important. I think collaboration and consensus is the key to optimize its benefits and to make sure that we limit the negative impact and effects and concentrate, obviously, on the positives. That's just my initial take.
Just to follow up, Mr. Does that mean that there has to be a kind of new partnership between government and the private sector to do what you're suggesting?
I strongly believe that, because obviously if government goes in one direction and private sector goes in the opposite direction, then of course you're not going to get the collaboration and consensus that is so needed in something as important as this. So we really need to concentrate on how we can collaborate as stakeholders, okay, rather than governments using the big stick approach.
Yeah, thank you very much. So this is an important question, and I'm going to go back to a pretty idealistic sounding answer. I live in a democracy. I'm very, very proud to live in a democracy. And the Americas is populated with wonderful different ways of implementing democracies, and the only answer to that question that I want to have is it's the people. It's democracies. We have to decide how we want these systems to operate. as a population through our democratic processes. Now, for that to happen, we have to make sure we're educated. We have to raise the general awareness of AI within our population so that we can fulfill the role of a democracy to make informed judgments about what is acceptable and what is unacceptable use. I know it gets nuancy there, but I just don't want to lose that core focus of who is responsible. It is our people. Yes, there are authoritarian states who are using these systems also. I don't want to live in a world where authoritarian states get to decide these answers to this question. They will do so in their own ways, but I believe the power of democracies is democratic processes with an informed population.
But again, let me follow up. Do authoritarian governments have an advantage in shaping the trajectory of this? Because democracies are messy.
They're designed, the US was designed to be slow. I mean, that is core to the whole premise of the government is checks and balances and slow, painful deliberation. So, yes, there are some issues. The problem, as I see it, is that when you sit down to look at the AI technology right now, it has been developed and helpful to people who aggregate data. Having all your data in one place actually is an advantage. It enables top-down decision-making in a way that has heretofore been impossible because of the nature of communication and awareness. So I think we as developers and we as policymakers and we as people need to think about how we incentivize the design of AI systems to play to democracy. Some of the smaller data models, such as reinforcement learning, I think have a key element to enabling democracies more than all my data sits in my lake and I control everything. The privacy-preserving technologies that you mentioned are another part. So I think we have to intentionally design a world that enables and advantages democracies and counters the authoritarian uses. So, but I think that's going to have to be intentional because right now it tends to lean more.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I would definitely wholeheartedly concur on that. And I think to the question of do authoritarians have an advantage, there are some, certainly the ability to centralize data, to not care as much about individual privacy, to not be bound by equitability and accountability in the same way that democratic governments are. A big issue with AI systems is right now, the state of the art is generally not explainable. When you get these results from ChatGPT, you're like, what the heck? How did this get into this strange loop of this conversation? And even the developers and engineers building the systems don't fully understand what the emergent phenomena of the systems are. And that can be a real problem for democracies, because if we're going to have AI systems making decisions about who gets a loan, which resumes get surfaced for the hiring manager, even in a human and machine team, we need to make sure that these systems are free from bias, that they can be scrutinized, that if someone sues a company for not hiring them on account of a discriminatory action, that if an AI system was making those decisions, the company needs to be able to go back and say, well, here's why we selected this resume and not this one. And right now, with a lot of AI systems, you can't do that. And so why does that matter for democracy and authoritarianism? Well, an authoritarian country doesn't necessarily have to have that same scrutiny. They you know, in systems without an independent judiciary, there isn't that ability to challenge. And so that's one way I think authoritarian states can race ahead. But I did also want to touch on the question of access and sort of to Dewey's point on citizens and democracies should be making these decisions. I think there really is a role for governments to play here in providing access and also giving a little bit of a steer on the values that we want to build in those technologies. And I'll just give two quick examples. One, both from the US government, where I served before coming over to the German Marshall Fund. One, the US is building a national AI research resource, public resource, whether that's data, computing infrastructure, so that it's not only the Metas and the Microsofts and the OpenAIs that are building these systems, but that they can be built by and also analyzed and studied and scrutinized by the public. And then the second example is something that was very near and dear to my heart. As part of the Summit for Democracy, we launched an initiative called the Democracy Affirming Technologies Grand Challenges. And this was a global effort, including entrepreneurship competitions from around the world, to create entrepreneurship communities to build these democracy-affirming technologies, like privacy-preserving AI, like responsible AI, like building AI and emerging technologies that have accountability and equity and privacy baked in from the start. And I think the theory there is that we don't have to always go with our worst instincts, that we can actually put some principles in on the front end and provide that steer so that these technologies can work for democracy. And I think that's really one of the amazing things about innovation, is that every generation of technology is a new opportunity to replace the old generation and imbue our values into it more and more.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Lindsay, that's great. Everything you said, I wholeheartedly agree with. I also wanted to add that, where there's innovation and technology presents potentially harms, it is also technology that can cure for harms, right? So we can look to the technology that's being innovated to steer through those more difficult, challenging harms that we're concerned about. And as you mentioned, I do think that the building of AI has to build in those concerns from the beginning all the way through the process. So one of the things that we have in our AI building model is a fairness flow, to your point about fairness, where our machine learning engineers have to focus on statistical bias as they actually build out a model. And then beyond that, as you point out, it's important from an accountability perspective that you're actually measuring the impact as well, right? So it's not just the inputs that go into it, but what is the ultimate impact of that model, and assessing its impact and making sure that you're making the right determinations about how that model needs to be changed or tweaked to improve for fairness.
Thank you. I want to get back to this democracy piece a little later, but I want to focus a bit more on governments that you've all discussed. I think it was Robert, but I think some of you have addressed this question. I want to be able to drill down a little bit about how governments can leverage AI to address socioeconomic challenges, healthcare, inequality, access to education, et cetera. Can we have a discussion where we can drill down a little bit about how AI can be helpful in addressing today's challenges?
A couple of projects that we do, not necessarily driven by government, but in partnership with government and NGOs. We have Data for Good, and we have used AI technology to help in moments of crises. We have what we call population mapping, and so we're able to take AI and use it to determine through visual imagery technology where the largest populations of people are located so that we can direct resources, help NGOs direct resources to those individuals in a time of crises. We've done work like that. We've also have a wealth index that allows us to very narrowly find, from a AI perspective, structurally where folks living in the greatest poverty are, all the way down to sub-neighborhoods. So again, governments can direct resources to those communities to ensure folks that are living in these communities can get the resources they need. Those are ways that AI, in partnership, as we've talked about here, in collaboration with companies and NGOs, can get resources better distributed to communities.
Sure.
Yes, in Argentina we also work through these kind of projects. We recently transferred a research project we had with SIDA and the Swiss cooperation to develop some new modulo, I don't know the name in English, for the electronic health history for each person, and the most populated province in Argentina using this module to prevent new focuses. We are using IA to prevent focuses on dengue and some other endemic diseases in Argentina. It was for COVID. originally, but now we are using it for other diseases, and it's working very well, and it can predict through your health history, and we work with algorithms that paid attention to not having these biases, no, for gender or socioeconomic situation or location. We work to develop those kind of algorithms that can predict this in our country. That's a very huge problem that we have right now. And we are also creating a new institution with some funds from the IDB with multilateral cooperation that can also work with regulatory sandboxes and inform our government to what kind of laws and regulations we need to address these issues.
Robert, you?
Yeah, let me chime in on a couple of quick things without causing feedback, hopefully. I try to break this down into a couple different pots of applications. The sexy stuff, if you want to call it that, are things like using AI and satellite data to do things like my colleague from Med was talking about, analyze where things are happening. And that can be extraordinarily important after times of natural disaster, where you can use AI to figure out where the damage is, how the roads look, identify problems and ways to get around and get humanitarian assistance to people in great need. It can also be used for issues of national security, if you want to call it that. The balloon that floated across the United States a little while ago, the company that tracked it back is one of our partner companies, and it used AI plus publicly available satellite data to figure out the track backwards through time and space. That's really interesting stuff, and that can be, those sorts of visual applications can be used for firefighting, they can be used for law enforcement, they can be used for transportation planning. Really, the possibilities are truly endless, and one of the most exciting and challenging parts of my job is to try to begin to corral these and help make them all happen. The less sexy stuff is maybe as impactful longer term. The productivity of government workers and the use of taxpayer dollars can be dramatically improved just by taking out some of the boring stuff that people have to do every day to get their jobs done, whether that's drafting emails or moving from a document to a PowerPoint presentation. And AI is beginning to facilitate that change, that transmission of information from one format to another so quickly that it's allowing workers to focus on the more interesting part and the most socially productive parts of their jobs. One last thing. All governments around the world have been moving from manual input of data to more automatic input of data over the last 20 years. And each government is at a different stage in that process. By using AI's capabilities, one can take old data sets and transfer them automatically into new data sets that can be run on today's computers. It can take massive volumes of information on paper, scan it in automatically into data sets, analyze it, summarize it, and make it into reports. So the possibilities of productivity driven by AI, I really get excited talking about this because we're only beginning to see the future, and as somebody who cares about how my taxpayer dollars are being spent, I'm really honored to be a part of creating some new solutions.
Thank you. Dewey, let me ask you a question. You mentioned, and others can chime in as well, but you mentioned people. In our region, as you know, we have marginalized groups that don't have, forget about access to technology, just access to a lot of things, and therefore are quite vulnerable. So with these communities in these 32, 33, 34 countries in the region, how can these communities sort of take advantage of this technology, but also sort of protect themselves because they're so vulnerable from the negative effects of AI?
This is an extremely important question. First of all, every one of so we do a lot of analysis trying to help decision makers, and it's all publicly available. And the primary conclusion we have found is about people. And that's not just a tagline that feels good. It is literally about people. It's about the talent, it's about the capabilities, it's about their awareness, it's about their creativity, and it's about their rights. We did a study with the Global Partnership on AI, where we looked at data justice. We surveyed and worked with partners from Chile to China, from the people in Maori people in New Zealand to Pakistan and India. And what we asked was about data governance, because I honestly believe that the core challenge, I'm taking the negative part first, I'll go to the positive later, is making sure that data governance and the management of that data collected from, often from underprotected groups without necessarily their consent, or maybe with their consent, but without their informed consent, is an incredibly powerful, because it's that data is really valuable, but also very, very practical place. So the thing is, when we come rolling in from the West and say, oh, you must care about data privacy, we ran across a number of times where this conversation made no sense. They're like, well, privacy, particularly, for example, the Maori people, it's like, yeah, privacy is not quite the right concept. I'm interested in community sovereignty. I want to make sure we have rights as a community, but individual rights don't carry the same weight or the same vocabulary significance as it does in the US. So I could go on for a long time, but let me just wrap up with the concept. I think corporations, individuals need to make sure they understand who their stakeholders are, engage those stakeholders very, very consciously and continuously, because there's a lot of surprises on how the stakeholder communities. So in the Americas, for example, if you're building a system, actually engaging with those individuals, understanding their definitions, privacy is not necessarily exactly the frame that has to be in every single discussion. There's other characteristics, and I mentioned sovereignty, but there's other areas that have to be thought about. And I think that's an important right that each society needs to own and needs to claim and needs to be informed enough to be able to claim, wait, I'm not going to give you rights to everything, my valuable insights, just because you offer me shiny object number 6. And I think we have to be very important to that. Now, there are wonderful positive elements, but I just think that data governance part is a really important aspect. Hopefully that's a little helpful.
Thank you. Minister, would you like to?
Just to say that it's so important to be here to listen to this discourse, because obviously, as small island developing states, we're not as advanced, and therefore it's important that we collaborate and that this information is passed on so that we too can actually get onto the learning curve in relation to AI and its true meaning in terms of what it can do for small island developing states like Jamaica. So it's really interesting to listen to the perspectives of what I consider to be the experts, those who are much further advanced in their research. And we really look forward to collaborating, and to say that for us as a government, what we need to do is make sure the policy and regulations are there early rather than having to play catch up.
Thank you.
Yes, I think I agree with what you've been saying. I think it's very important that we can focus on people's rights and to focus on the development of our countries and societies. We, as a democracy now, we have 40 years of democracy on a row. So it is very important for Argentina to continue with these discussions and the democratic dialogue, so that we can preserve the rights of our people. And we also need to think of ways of giving access to these new technologies, so that more people can use and know what they are using and what they are doing. But we as a government and the laws we create or the laws we have need to protect these rights, because if not, we are like naked in this IA network, and we don't know what to do, and you don't know if it's a fake voice or if it's an image of a scene that really happened, what you are seeing. So I believe we of course need to bring together all the stakeholders to create and to discuss these new laws and regulations we need.
Let me I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Oh.
And another thing I wanted to say about the jobs, that yes, we can reskill workers, we can reskill professionals, but I don't know, it may have taken like 30, 40 years for Mrs. McNutt to be in the position she has, and now that if they tell her, no, you know, IA can replace your job, she would say no, and there's no way. And if you ask other professionals, I don't know, architects or some other professionals, IA may replace their work or their jobs. So first we need to answer the question if we want that, and for jobs that can really be automated and that increase productivity, there's a big discussion in different countries about a global income for people that won't have their jobs anymore. So how are they going to live? How are they going to buy things, and what are they going to do with their time if they cannot be reskilled? No, not everyone is going to be reskilled. I mean, people 50 or 40, 50 years old, they may not be in the portion of the workers that can be reskilled so easily. So we need to think of different policies to preserve the right of living of our societies.
I just wanted to add really quickly onto this concept of, I think, there needs to be the sense of our data, our value, because I think the sort of oil analogy gets batted around a lot with AI and with data, and there's sort of very many ways in which that analogy is not quite right. You know, but people talk about it in the sense of it's going to have this geopolitical importance, and it's leading to potential conflict, and the countries who can control and amass data can have enormous geopolitical power. And I think we are seeing a race to amass the world's data to feed into better and better AI systems. I mean, ChatGPT requires just reams and reams of data and reams of computing power to even process that data. And I think there's a real risk that large countries and companies will gobble up the world's data, and particularly in the global south and in many smaller countries, there risks this kind of being the same sort of extractive capacity that we've seen with oil, where the big companies and countries come in and extract the natural resources, the mineral resources from smaller countries, and there isn't really that sense of being able to provide that value back. And I think we risk seeing the same thing with data, where there's an incredible value to diverse data, because in order to be able to train these systems to do many different things, just having one type of data from one race or one ethnicity or one language even doesn't really produce a great system, and it certainly doesn't produce something that resembles human intelligence. We need a really diversity of data, particularly when we're talking about some of the medical implications and the applications. I'm mentioning analyzing mammograms, and we really need a sort of a diverse data set to have the best performance. And so I think there is a risk that in the effort to do that, we won't be able to apply the sort of our data, our value proposition that smaller countries really should derive the same value from their own data and not just sort of offer it up. And maybe if the individual doesn't necessarily care, the value of each bit of data, maybe, $1 or something like that. But at a larger scale, at a sort of a community scale or a national scale, that we need to find a way of giving that value in exchange for that data and actually allowing smaller countries and companies to capitalize on the data of their own populations and themselves.
So I'm going to ask one or two more questions. So for the audience, please be ready to formulate your questions and come to the mic that's here in the middle of the room. We'll be coming to you soon. So the Deputy Secretary started raising this question that I wanted to ask, which is, it would be remiss not to ask the Luddite question, right? The fear, which is, can these technologies, what is the threat to job security, to employment, right? Particularly in communities that are not as developed, right? Don't have the same access, but their jobs can be easily perhaps replaced. So how do you respond to this traditional question that we've had for over a century, right? If anyone can address that particular point to make us either fearful or more optimistic.
I'm both concerned, but I'm very optimistic at the same time. I have to be. So I'm a guy in his early 50s, and it's painful to say that, who would have a very tough time probably reskilling. So trust me, I certainly feel concerns about, and I'm a white-collar information technology professional, and a lot of the things I do every day at some point will probably be done much more efficiently and much more quickly by AI. Okay? That's the sort of world that we're heading into. So the question is, how do we build the world that's more equitable, that realizes the value of this technology and minimizes the human costs of it? And that gets back to the skilling issues we've been talking about. That gets back to that cooperation between industry and academia, civil society and governments, so that we begin to, early on in this process, identify those types of jobs that are most likely to be affected. Some of them are going to be much more enjoyable, much more productive, much more fulfilling for the workers, because they're not going to have to be doing a lot of the work that they didn't really like having to do in the past. Some jobs will be disrupted. That's where I would focus both government and industry and academic skilling initiatives on that subset of jobs, which over time are going to be most impacted. I say over time because GPT has just kind of hit the public consciousness. It's going to take time for all of this to really impact society in the ways that we're all both seeing as a possibility and we're afraid of. So I'm not at all trying to minimize the concern, but I'm saying it's manageable, and it's manageable if we're talking about it. But the first thing that we have to do is the other thing we have to do is realize that connectivity is the baseline for any of these jobs to even make a difference in many of these communities. And AI, for the first time probably in history, has provided the possibility for many of these jobs, these intellectually focused jobs, to stay in many of these countries and stay in many of these communities, because there's no reason to move to the United States or to Canada to work on AI issues. You can do that in Jamaica, you can do that in Argentina, you can do that all across the Americas. What it takes is for that investment and time by industry and academia and government to work together to build that infrastructure so those jobs can stay home and they can be more fulfilling.
I'll add one snarky comment, please forgive it. But I think one of the reasons that we're freaked out about ChatGPT is this is not a technology that's coming for pipe fitters and welders. It's coming for me. It's coming for you. I mean, I don't mean to be overly dramatic, but I think that's why this has got people like up in arms, because like, wait, I write emails all day. And wait, how is this what is my value add? So I actually think the white-collar workers are the ones who are shifting most uncomfortably in their seat right now. And I think the pipe fitters and welders have a long future of really important jobs. I can't see a world where a good welder is not needed, for at least my vision of the future. So, sorry, that's the snark comment. But I do think, for me, and lawyers and other people like that, there's going to be some shifting going on, because the stuff that is super easily billable might actually be changing dramatically. Okay, so sorry for the snark. The other comment is the hard work of economic development. AI will not be the magic bullet to take care of this thing. There is the grind every day of developing a stronger economy, helping individuals get the education they need, see the opportunities. I think there are really exciting personalized learning capabilities, like me sitting with ChatGPT in a good environment. I can learn a tremendous amount 10 times quicker. If focused by a country appropriately, you might be able to actually get some really interesting education. I don't know how that works yet, but I see a lot of education opportunities, development opportunities that I'm stoked about, that I think developing countries can capitalize on. It might not look like Harvard's education track, but good, it shouldn't. I'm not sure how long Harvard's education track, no, sorry, I don't mean to be poking at Harvard, it's a wonderful institution, but the established education systems are going to have to change. And I think that we have to recognize that, and it's a real opportunity for developing nations to go ahead and just grab the bull by the horns and say, let's change this for our people.
I just want to, I agree with that wholeheartedly, and I'm going to go back to what Lindsay said a little while back about the data value proposition. And I think that's part of the reason that we think that as we approach the frameworks around AI and how we both develop it and protect against it, that we do it on an international level so that there are multi-stakeholders in the conversation. So we are having, countries in Africa, we are meeting with, we need to have that holistic approach to how we address this. So there can be discussions around, well, what's the trade-off for us to engage in this community, in this product building? And so I think that's where that needs to be addressed.
Okay, well, let's turn to our audience. So please identify yourself and ask the question of any of the panelists.
My name is Michael Nelson. I'm in the Technology and International Affairs program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. And I'm very glad to be invited to this. This has been a rich discussion. Like our keynote speaker, Dr. McNutt, I was trained as a geophysicist. I did some coding, but I'm really excited about data. So I want to focus on the data piece, which a few of you have talked about. But as is typical at most AI conversations, we're spending way too much time on the algorithms and the developers who make them. There's really a way of thinking about this ecosystem. I'm going to use virtual PowerPoint to draw a slide in the sky. At the bottom, you have a few thousand developers at hundreds of companies. They're writing the algorithms. Then you have the buyers and the users of the system, millions of them. And then you have the data at the very top. So we have an upside-down pyramid. Billions of people are producing that data, and yet the politicians are typically focusing on regulating the developers, which is crazy because the code they're writing is rewriting itself constantly. So how do you regulate ever-changing code? What we can do is do something about the data. So my challenge to any of you is, what would you have politicians do, and how would you help them understand the real problem here, which is getting good data, unbiased data, to all the people who can use it? And related to that is, how do you get politicians to actually get excited about data? When I worked on Capitol Hill 30 years ago, I could make a senator's eyes glaze over in 30 seconds by simply saying the word data management. So what's the word we need? How can we motivate the discussion? And what would you do if you were data czar?
Anybody? Dewey, go ahead.
Sorry, anyone else can go first. I spoke last. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. Data, when I sit down with any major stakeholders, government or corporate, what I hear is the data governance part is actually the part that's the biggest problem. And it's really hard to get a head around that. It does put me to sleep sometimes. So I mean, I just acknowledge that every once in a while, like, and it feels so impossible. I think the key word I would like to insert into the discussion is trust. Data trust, let's just call that for just a second. How do we go toward that? I have seen in the Midwest of the US, a deep dive in the trust of government agencies. They're not sure what census is going to do with this data. Are they going to find me as a person who's not legally in the US and this is their method for vetting me out and smoking me out? That's terrifying. So there's a deep trust in data governance issues from the government. So I would propose that there needs to be some kind of public-private partnership that has, let's just call it a data trust, where they've got trustees who are acting in a way that people will trust, and there's some kind of process to be able to validate that trust in some meaningful way. And with that data trust then comes protections, right and fair uses of data, and then that data, as it starts, that data trust as it gathers steam, becomes to have weight in the commercial space because it can actually change the landscape. And a nation state actually has the sovereignty to do this today. Be it Argentina or Chile, they can do this today, and as they group together as Americas, they could actually strengthen their vote on this particular issue. So this is entirely actionable, and there's a lot of experimentation to be done, but I think trust is the word that I would insert into the discussion.
Yes, please, go ahead.
I agree with you. I want to add some extra problem for the data. That's not just the data that we as citizens produce, but also the data that AI can infer from us, that we also need to see what we do with that inference of data, that maybe you don't say to any of your applications that you are not living legally in the United States, but it can infer that, and it can help you go outside the country. And that extra data we also need to address. I think it's, and we are making some new law for protecting personal data, and we still need to think a bit more about that, I think, in our country.
So, I've got some feedback. Is that mine? We're good? All right. This is obviously, I worked on Capitol Hill for 14 years, and I can't imagine Congress acting quickly around data trust issues. We've got an opportunity today to get ahead of an emerging technology that's going to be consequential for every part of society. And looking back over time, looking at social media, looking at even telecommunications, handheld telecommunications, we were not thinking at the time about the widespread social impacts of these new technologies. We are today for AI, and that is an absolute blessing, and it's a responsibility. We need to be taking this moment to drive effective regulation. And I would encourage folks to look more at the end uses of these processes and less the inputs, largely because I think we can actually wrap our arms around the end uses at this point, and we can begin to take a look at the highest risk end uses and begin to draw regulations and guardrails around those. Now, those regulations have to be flexible. They have to be able to evolve with what is a rapidly changing technology, which means we have to be careful about how they're drawn, and they also have to be recognizing different realities across geopolitical borders, so they have to be interoperable. All of which would lead one to say that unless we can come up with some sort of a common global approach on data, which, taking a look at GDPR and some of the other challenges we've had, maybe a better approach at this point would be to look at end uses rather than data itself.
Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Ramon Sanchez. I work at Harvard University. So thank you so much for the advertisement. So I'll send you your check later. Thank you. Well, I actually teach a class along with Dr. Linda Powers Tomaso, that is called Sustainable Innovation Driven by Climate Change Preparedness. And in that class, we use artificial intelligence, or at least our students, which are right there, they flew from Boston this morning. They try to create startups to protect the planet, to protect human health, and so on, okay? Something else that we do is that in classes, we analyze how innovation ecosystems work. We have decoded how Silicon Valley works, Boston, and so on, and we have the best practices for that. And we would like to help on accelerating the development and strengthening innovation ecosystems from Patagonia to Alaska, okay? Just let us know, we will be right there. But we are in the School of Public Health, the Harvard School of Public Health, so my question is related to that. And it will be, what is the role of artificial intelligence in preventing or significantly mitigating the next global pandemic? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We actually used artificial intelligence, some of our tools, during the COVID epidemic to help determine which folks had vaccinated, those people who hadn't, and what communities needed to be targeted for by NGOs and government medical institutions to make sure that they could deliver the drugs to those areas.
I think my answer to you would be, what do you want it to do? Like, the possibilities of AI for every part of the epidemiological chain are absolutely incredible. So from the beginning, sensing anomalies in data, and those can actually not be specifically health data. Those could be communications data. It could be transportation anomalies. But the indication of an outbreak can be picked up by AI far before it would be picked up by normal epidemiological monitoring surveillance mechanisms. So that's, the entering process. And once an outbreak has been detected, let's analyze it. Let's figure out what it is, what it's really all about. The use of AI to analyze proteins, for instance, has been an incredible step forward for medical science. AI is also being used for material science and chemistry analysis. So to be able to use AI to analyze the problem and over time develop solutions for it will be incredible. And then finally, the delivery of the solution can, as was mentioned by my colleague, can be improved exponentially by being able to use AI to monitor who's received the vaccine or the treatment, find gaps, and then analyze why there are gaps and how to fix those gaps. So again, it's almost the power of the human imagination is the only limitation for how this tool can be used for situations like that.
Lindsay.
Yeah, I would add, I think there's sort of detecting the next pandemic and then what requires us to actually act on that detection. And I think most of the action we saw came in sort of the pharmaceutical development. But I would like to say that I think that the power of generative AI specifically to revolutionize scientific discovery, including in health and pharmaceuticals and sort of the drug development life cycle, is something we haven't really talked much about, but this event is co-sponsored by the National Academy of Sciences, and I really think it is going to open up a tremendous avenue of discovery because, when we think of generative AI, we're mostly thinking of the large language models. They're generating text to sound like humans, but that's because that's what it's been trained on, human-generated corpuses of text. But say you could generate an AI system, a generative AI system not trained on human corpuses of text, but on, say, the immune markers for a certain disease. There's just an incredible amount of biological data, and the state of understanding of it is really quite poor, even in the human body. But there's an incredible amount of data, whether it's protein expressions or foldings or these immune markers, and we haven't done really the first job of processing it and understanding it. So I think generative AI has this power to generate hypotheses from data. And of course, they're not going to be right the first go around, but really aid the sort of human creativity and scientific discovery process in generating and testing hypotheses that we might not come up with, or it might take us centuries to come up with as scientists in a much faster time, if we can get the data governance piece right, and if we can sort of bring the data together in a way that protects privacy and ensures value creation for the owners of that data.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Joshua New with IBM. It's a fascinating discussion. Thank you all for being here. I want to say two things, and the first one is that terrible DC thing of more of a comment than a question, but I promise the second one is a question. So I really want to reiterate, Robert, what you said about focusing on end uses of this technology as a priority for policymakers. A lot of discussion today about how, the need to develop consensus and bring together stakeholders to understand where we need new laws and how we can apply existing frameworks effectively. I just want to point out that, when we develop, human rights legislation or civil liberties protections, they don't say anywhere that this does not apply if AI is involved. These are technology neutral policies. And I think we need to be very thoughtful about how we can modernize and adapt these existing frameworks to effectively mitigate all the risks that we identified today, which are real risks, but in a way that actually relies on sort of the institutional momentum that we have around governing these kind of risks. So second, again to Robert, very fascinated to read the news today out of the White House about Microsoft and a handful of other companies' commitments to sort of a public auditing or security-minded focus to generative AI systems at DEF CON. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about how that kind of like, I'm assuming it's like a red teaming mentality or like public awareness and scrutiny of these systems can promote a healthier AI ecosystem more broadly, delivering these benefits safely and more rapidly.
Well, I will say that I don't have the full detail on what was announced today. In fact, I don't think even the Vice President has the full detail yet. It's a process that we're going to be moving forward to develop. But the underlying theory that we need feedback and we need open conversation about how these models are developing or how they're actually being implemented is really core to everything we do around AI. When we released when ChatGPT released GPT-4 and we began to release our models, they had gone through internal beta testing through thousands and thousands of person hours to figure out what goes right and what goes wrong. But then when we released them to the initial set of users, it was a very limited set, they came up with entirely new ways that they could break the model. And then when we released it to a larger set, then you had Sydney falling in love with our friend over at the New York Times. So the more informed users and the more creative users we have taking a look at these models and testing them, the more we're going to be able to learn and make sure that they actually produce the benefits for society that we all want them to achieve. So I'm going to have to hold off on answering your specific question on how the DEF CON approach is going to work, but it's not new for Microsoft to have our products tested. It's incredibly important for all of our colleagues in this space to get feedback from both the public sector as well as technologists, and this is one, I think, important step to improve that transparency.
Anybody else want to respond to the comment or the question?
Yeah, I would add on to that and say I think this certainly we've seen similar projects at DEF CON with the hacking village, hacking sort of election systems and sort of crowdsourcing cybersecurity, if you will. But I do think that sort of building this red teaming, and specifically with our democracy in mind, in addition to the security, sort of the basic security of the systems, is really, really important. And it gets to something that I think Evelyn sort of alluded to earlier about building this sort of into the product development cycle, because I think the generation of technologies, and particularly social media that we're working with today, we had really a naivety that they would be inherently good for democracy. We saw the Arab Spring, we saw the power of people to connect and what that meant for organizing and for democracy. And we kind of rested on our laurels, assuming that that would just always be the case. And in the last decade, we've seen quite the opposite happen. We've seen the rise of authoritarian states like Russia and China weaponizing social media platforms, either to sow discord and disinformation within democracies or to surveil their own citizens. And we got lazy, I think, about building our values at that very critical stage of red teaming very, very early on in the product development cycle. And so that's what I hope initiatives like the one announced today will build that in and recognize that a lot of these things, increasing polarization on YouTube, for example, were quite predictable, actually, had they been built in and sort of red teamed in that way at the forefront. And so I hope we'll do that with AI. I hope we'll do it with generative AI, and that we'll be building our sort of democratic values and thinking about what societal impacts what could go wrong in the worst case scenario, in addition to on the security side.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for this event. My name is Ramiro Jordan. I work at the University of New Mexico. We're not new and we're not Mexico. Make sure that's clear. I'm Associate Dean, responsible for global initiatives. And in 2018, we organized the first global peace engineering conference. A challenge to every discipline to change the mindset to address the global challenges. Connect the dots with social science, engineering sciences. We have perhaps the highest concentration of scientists in New Mexico because of the national labs, and of course, it's a poor state. Where the Navajo, the highest index of people dying of COVID, were in Navajo and New Mexico. So we have that challenge. We see data as key. It's about trusted data. Who owns the data is a key question, okay? Is it who has the rights to the data? Okay, Europe has gone to create policy for data. Trust is, like you said, very important. There is a standard called trust for data. We've been working for this for many years. And we had good collaboration with OAS many years ago, and we are part of that. Okay. What happened in that conference, we had a panel of scientists, November 2018, where they warned us that we were going to hit a pandemic. 2019, we had it. So it's about AI, predicting, and all of that. So I think it's a challenge, and the question now is, 2030 is the point of no return. At least science is pointing that we're going to start hitting issues with climate change. That's 79 months from today. We don't have the talent to address and come up with solutions. Academia, everybody's behind. So this is not really an AI question, but how can we address and start coming up with AI, not AI, changing the mentality of everybody to address the global challenge by 2030. We got 79 months. Academia cannot produce the talent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Point is taken. Yes, please.
I think it's good afternoon now, pretty soon. My name is Wendy. I am a student in the Master of Science in Foreign Service at Georgetown University. I'm concentrated in science, technology, and international affairs very recently. Used to be global politics and security. Still have the same interests, but I would like to focus more on the technology aspects. My question is, how can we use existing institutions to encourage regional cooperation to bring those developing countries that are behind and prevent further exacerbating development gaps with their lack of agency in the data, and make AI governance and regulation a priority for them? Do we only focus on those with similar democratic values?
Go ahead, Dewey.
I just wanted to say one thing about the last question. I think people get apoplectic or get a hyperventilating and freaking out about AI. And I think that's actually, there's times to do that. But I think one thing I just wanted to comment, that there's a lot of confluence of issues facing our society right now that we really need to think about. And I think it is a systemic look. You've got climate, you've got population issues, in this case, many times population decrease. You've got climate change. And I think that the intersection of these points is actually where our best minds and talent need to be looking at to figure out how to come up with ideas. And one of the things I like about OEA and a variety of other organizations, we don't know how to solve this problem, but many different entities experimenting and learning from each other is going to be an extremely effective way to try a lot of things, because we don't have much time. We need to experiment, and I think that distribution. So sorry for going back to that question, but I wanted to come back. I can also just briefly mention sorry, I just lost the question on the next one. Oh yes, there are a lot of fascinating organizations that are actively involved in trying to address development, data governance, and I think the question is OECD has put a lot of energy into this space. Our host organization here is putting energy into this space. The Global Partnership on AI is there are existing organizations. And also there's been a call for the AI International Regulatory Organization. I don't forget it. I think I scrolled the letters up a little bit. And there's also calls for US regulation systems. There actually are a lot of organizations that have I can't speak. governance responsibilities. And I think working with those, and that's why I liked your question so much, is there is existing organizations being able to work with the FCC, working able the FTC, the FDA. I'm speaking obviously of US organizations, but it's very important that just because it's a new crisis doesn't mean we need a new organization. There are existing ones that are really well tuned. There might need to be tuning. Maybe there's some organizations that need to disappear. But overall, we have a pretty sophisticated coverage space, and I think we have to empower each of those organizations to be able to address these new challenges. And to me, to the previous, the talent is really what we're looking for. We have to be, it's why Georgetown has a lot of programs, a lot of other wonderful universities. We've got to train the next talent. I think it's really the key elements. Others?
No, I couldn't, just my 2 cents, I couldn't agree more. I think these issues cannot be solved by 1 or 2 countries alone. Multilateralism, international regional cooperation are indispensable in providing the framework, at least, to working together to address these challenges. So, absolutely. International institutions are perhaps more important now than they've ever been. We have 2 more questions.
Good morning. My name is Rosibel Ochoa, and I am the Associate Vice Chancellor for Technology Partnerships at the University of California in Riverside. And in my career, my job is actually to help scientists start companies, technology innovation companies, from the US in California, as well as from Latin America. I've been working with the OEA for many years already, helping scientists from Latin America understand what it takes to access the US market. So as you can imagine, I'm very excited about AI. We've been working with scientists and looking at solutions in agriculture, in healthcare, new financial systems. It's extremely exciting. However, I also live in a region that is, and this is in the United States, that in many cases is similar to many places in Latin America. 5 million people, 50% Latinos, and 300,000 small businesses. Many of these small businesses are owned by women. And what I focus on is trying to accelerate insertion of technology, high tech, into these small businesses so they can compete and scale faster, which is one of the initiatives of this administration. And what I find is there's a tremendous gap in terms of technology awareness and technology, even tools, processes, and systems. So these businesses, it's not about them learning about AI, it's about using tools that they can leverage the potential of this technology so they can compete. So my question to you is how can, from a policy standpoint, but also from a corporate standpoint, like Microsoft, Meta, the private sector, and academia, can we work together so we don't leave these small businesses behind, which are the engines of many of our economies? Thank you.
Thank you for your insights and contribution. Anybody want to address that part of that question? Yes, go ahead, Liz.
I don't know if I have all the answers, but I think one that it needs to be part of this equation is the role of public infrastructure. And that's the way to sort of lift everyone up and allow everyone to participate. And I think about the sort of great scientific collaborations of the last century, CERN and particle physics, and the scientists coming together to discover the kind of minute properties, really very theoretical questions of elementary particle physics. But then also the technological advances that the work towards those scientific goals actually spun out in magnetism and connectivity as a result of those large-scale scientific collaborations. And I wonder if something similar could be done in artificial intelligence, because we don't really understand exactly how these systems work. We need huge international partnerships to study how even whether there's an intelligence there, how artificial intelligence systems are learning, are moving from sort of memorization to maybe some sort of conceptual learning if they're doing that. So there's a lot of study that I think, and going back to the question of organizations, organizations like the OAS or other partnerships could build that would allow companies and big and small, as well as academic researchers, to come together in the study so that we're all kind of on the same playing field. And these technologies are not sort of siloed in individual companies, accessible only to sort of a select few researchers. And so I think that's maybe one way that the smaller companies can have some of the same advantages by making this infrastructure public and building a public study and scientific infrastructure in an international collaborative way.
Let me jump in with just a couple thoughts on that. So it sounds to me as if you're seeing a need not necessarily for understanding AI and using AI itself, but to be able to use the benefits of AI to help many of these small businesses and folks who have been shut out of some of the more traditional government programs or economic cooperation programs across both your region and across the United States and internationally. And for me, that's a problem that AI is built for. What AI does is it democratizes access to technology. It takes these tools, which only a subset of professionals have generally used efficiently and effectively, and will make it available to everybody. Even if you can't read, even if you don't speak the dominant language in the area, through translation and through other tools, AI will open up access to these networks. The trick is to identify a subset of demands that folks like us, like Meta, like our friends over at AWS, IBM, and other places can come together and actually help to develop, and that can then be used and be easily replicated across that demand set. So I'd be more than happy to continue the conversation with you, but it does sound as if you're identifying a subset of need that is fairly well definable, and there should be some way to work with government, local government, and national government to be able to begin to meet that.
Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Laura Simmons. I'm from Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland. We are specifically working towards creating a curriculum for the Maryland school systems in hopes to get artificial intelligence into the schools and developing younger generations. However, that being said, Baltimore is one of the, is notoriously known for its sort of gap in education, that you have places like Western Baltimore that don't have nearly as much access to education or education tools such as technology and computers in their classroom that you may see in more well-developed neighborhoods or private school sectors. So I guess my question is sort of, as we develop different AI technologies, how the US or how other countries are sort of looking into bridging that gap to communities that that do have that technology gap, that how we can sort of narrow that gap between those that have and those that don't.
Yes, go ahead.
I actually wanted to rephrase what Robert said earlier, which is bring the problem and AI can probably find the solution. And I think that's exactly what would happen in this case. I think the goal would be to find a way for organizations, for the private sector and governments to come together and actually collaborate on how to solve, because I think that is really what's missing, not only in how we manage AI going forward, but also in what AI can do for the world, for individuals, for communities. So I do think the collaboration side of this is really critical as we move forward for rural areas, for Baltimore, for different parts of the country, for the small businesses that need the tools necessary to expand their businesses. That's the kind of collaboration that can come through from the private sector and government.
Yes.
Just wanted to say, what you're doing is extremely important already toward this. Developing good curricula, getting it to deployed and tested with a wide range of, like the Baltimore schools is such important work, because I think that, in my opinion, is one of the most important ways forward. K through 12 education really matters. Getting awareness, being exposed to what's possible, even if it's not necessarily widely available at home. that is life-changing. Being inspired by a teacher who can show, hey, look what you could do, opens up imaginations, and I think this is extremely important. I think the perception that to be able to work with AI, you have to have a PhD in who's a thingy thingy, needs to go away. The world is democratized, or the capabilities are available to more, and I think certification programs are really exciting because they can demonstrate capabilities of a certain point without having to go and have the resources to do it in the post-secondary education. Anyway, the point is, I think what you're doing is what I would say is the answer. Is education is the first and foremost block in this, and getting that widely dispersed in an effective way is really the exciting part.
We are unfortunately running out of time, so we have 2 more questions. If you could just have your questions, and then we'll have the panelists address both questions or comments. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. Ari Herrera, President of the Pan American Federation of Engineering Societies, UPADI. And I just wanted to say this is quite exciting. We signed an agreement with OAS some years ago to be a technical advisor to the team, the ministers that are here, and I cannot tell you the timing could not be better, and this is exciting. The U.S. has the president of the organization, and we're like the OAS of engineering. So it's at a national level. We have 32 countries, 5 regions, and most of these guys in all of these regions, they're either colleagues of yours, former ministers and leading engineering within their countries. And what we're doing right now is focusing on bringing the engineering and the scientists to the table. I mean, I cannot thank OAS enough for, what a wonderful event and what a powerful arrangement this is. Just to think, we have all of the decision makers that are not only have the position to change and to dictate the route on where we go with AI, but also developers and more than 3 million engineers that are here willing and ready to work and collaborate with you guys, the youth, creating opportunities. Right now we're focusing on taking engineering, right? Inspiring some to go this route. College students and the youth. And for that, mobility is one of the programs that at some point we signed an agreement. I guess Argentina was leading that mobility of all of the engineers throughout the Americas. The president of the technical council right now, University of Florida, we're going to have an event where we want to bring just young professionals and students from all of the Americas, from the Caribbean, to have a time to exchange, to learn, and to be able to collaborate so that we can move forward, what we're trying to do. And like engineering has no borders, AI has no borders. And and when you look at our continent where most of us speak Spanish, one word in one region could mean something completely different in another country where they speak Spanish. That's the need, like all of you have emphasized, access. We need to be those who create access, right? The most powerful thing we can do is to create access to those who will be the leaders and will take this on and move it forward. Second, this access will lead to exposure, right? It's needed. We talked about all of these different settings, rural, big, developed, small countries. Let's give them the access, right? And we're here to join with you to give them the exposure, make them aware, and hopefully what comes out of this is a resilient and sustainable development for all of those involved. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your work and your collaboration, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, good morning. Well, thank you very much for this possibility. I'm Maximiliano Mauvesin. I'm director of Global International Organization. We work for local economic development. And I cannot add anything else for what you were saying here, but I just was wondering what ChatGPT thinks about this. So I wrote to him, or her, I don't know, sorry. I wrote to ChatGPT and I asked it, what politics do you need, ChatGPT, to impact positively in education? And you know what it says? It says guidelines for responsible use. It says training for educators. It says continued research and evaluation of the information, accessibility and equity, and for the last, integration with curriculums. So just wanted to tell you what ChatGPT thinks about this. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a very nice way to end. Thank you. We are, unfortunately, at the end of our session, but I want to give our panelists another opportunity from your chairs to make any final closing remarks. So, Robert, we're going to go to you and go in reverse and end with so any final remarks or issues you want to raise?
Final issues. I want to take the moment to thank OIA, OAS for bringing this together, you for your very capable moderation of this panel, all of my panelists for their expertise and their contributions today, but mostly all of you for being here, for listening, for being a part of this conversation, and I hope for owning that we all have a role to play in this. We have to shape these rules and these regulations and these practices for ourselves, for our families, and for our governments. So take this with you. This would be my charge if I have the authority to give a charge. Take this conversation with you, spread it, share it with your colleagues, your friends, and your family, and then bring it back to your governments and your places of work so we can take this learning and really make AI to what it needs to be for society.
Yeah, here to those, the last two comments. I think ChatGPT, did a really fantastic job and is a great way to end the session. I mean, if I would add one kind of risk to that, and I think ChatGPT's answer was pretty solid, that I think, we haven't really talked about as much is this risk that content can seem really authentic and seem very helpful and like a human would produce, but actually be totally fictitious. And I think that's where there is a role for all of us to play in making sure that what we're producing is authentic, doing that extra check, because I think our democratic societies really depend on that. The ability to have a faithful public record, our libraries. And so as we sort of translate AI into our own communities, I would say that keeping sort of that faithfulness to the truth and that there is kind of a truth, an objective reality that isn't just kind of the average of what you're hearing from all sides is really important. And I think there's a chance that we risk losing that with systems that can sound really realistic but might not actually be factual. But very much want to thank OAS and NAS for this event. I learned a lot today from the panel and most importantly from the audience who are really doing, I think, the hard work in bringing these systems into communities and into companies and doing it in a way that is responsible and that is equitable and that champions our shared values. So thank you.
Yes, I would also like to thank everyone again, and all the panelists and the audience for their questions and their comments. I took on what you were saying, and I'm urging to go back home and start spreading this dialogue, and also that, like many other Latin American countries, we do have structural issues to solve that won't be only solved with AI or technology, but we need to see this as an opportunity to give more access to technology to our societies and to start or maybe think about how we can solve some other problems through technology. So I think that I'm bringing home a lot of homework. Yes. Thank you so much.
Chairman of COMSIT, and of course, on behalf of the government of Jamaica, I have listened more than I have spoken because obviously of the panelists and of course the audience and their expertise in this area. So I leave here much better informed, and hopefully we can use that to introduce the proper policies and regulations for AI in Jamaica going forward. So I really appreciate the invitation to be here, and of course, in this esteemed audience of professionals and experts on AI. And to you, moderator, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been super fun hanging out and learning from each other here. I'm really excited because of the important consequence of this conversation, because this is part of the democratic process. This is, and I think it's extremely important to keep these dialogues going. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, a lot of experimentation, a lot of learning. Humility is actually really important to maintain, because I'm still, at least, trying to figure out what the best way forward is. The only thing I'm confident is AI assessment is going to be essential. You know, red teaming, third-party auditors, making sure they're empowered, making sure that we have, you know, we can break down tasks and use cases so that we can actually use them effectively and make sure they're actually doing what we think, and making sure that we have the, I'll borrow a term for medicine, clinical trials in place to make sure that these kinds of testing really work. So lots of work ahead. I look forward to working as part of this with all of you, and thank you for the excellent conversation.
I'm last, and I'm stopping you all from getting lunch, so I'll do this quickly. Thank you so much for having me to the OAS. This has been an incredible experience. I'm glad I didn't have to speak in Spanish. That would have been more challenging. I think that what I am just so pleased about is that there seemed to be actually consensus across all of us on the things that we're looking to see happen in the space of AI, and that we're all concerned about the same things. We think, and that solutions seem to be in line. So I think that gives me great comfort given the risk associated with AI. And I agree with you that assessment and just keeping our eye on the ball with AI will be really important going forward. So thank you so much for your time. I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. And I look forward to seeing all of you again sometime soon.
Thank you so much. Before I turn it over to the Executive Secretary, I just want to thank all of you in the audience for being here and for participating in this discussion and giving me the opportunity to moderate and to learn from this experience as well. And finally, one last applause for this wonderful panel that has brought so much for us in understanding this issue. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Mora. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. I think this was beyond our expectations. It is really, I think, more than we expected to have from this panel today. This is the first, we hope, of many to come. Obviously, this is an evolving issue, and we at the OAS, we like to pride ourselves on being the premier mechanism, the premier avenue for discourse and dialogue on issues of critical importance for the region. And so we want to continue to remain seized of this issue, to continue to dialogue, discuss, and really analyze how these technologies are going to impact our people. I think somebody made the point that this is about people. The engagement of people across the board. We want to make sure that our people can benefit from and not be disenfranchised by those emerging technologies. I want to thank Secretary General Almagro for being with us for the duration of this dialogue. For SG, thank you for your continued support to our work. I had a summary, but I think ChatGPT has already summarized what we've learned today. We are competing with an OAS budgetary meeting, so I'm really happy that people had split screens even when they were engaged virtually. To our audience and the partners who are joining us here today, to those from the academic community, we really value the support that you have given to us in the Secretariat for Integral Development and our work on science, innovation, and technology. In terms of skills, let me just say that one of the first things that was mentioned is the need to build the capacity of our countries to embrace those technologies and to develop them responsibly. In 2021, Secretary General Almagro, under the leadership of Minister Vaz, as chair of the COMCIT, launched the Youth Academy on Transformative Technologies. and that Youth Academy is designed to do just that. How do we ensure that our people have the skills, have the credentials that are needed to work globally, because this is, of course, a global engagement. And so we are looking for partners. Microsoft would love to have you on board. We do have Meta. Meta's launched our program with augmented reality, and we've been offering training and certification on the Youth Academy on augmented reality. I believe there are other partners in the room who will be joining us with new courses, and we have a goal of 10,000 young people in the Americas trained on those technologies by 2024. So time is running really short, but I would say in the first month of launching the Youth Academy, 25,000 young people from across the Americas registered on the platform. That tells us that our people want to be engaged with those new technologies. And finally, we are working on centers of excellence across the Americas. We've opened the first center of excellence on blockchain technology in Hidalgo, Mexico. I believe Chile will be the next in line on artificial intelligence, on robotics and artificial intelligence in Barranquilla, Colombia, nanotechnology in Peru. And so we are building that capacity across the region so that our people can really benefit from those. And the idea of the centers of excellence is to do joint research, to map trends so that our policymakers can approach this from an informed perspective. And so again, to our panelists, thank you so much for responding to our call for engagement. We want to continue to engage with you. Think of us as this honest broker who's in between facilitating and conducting and reaching out to our countries. And to those joining us from our capitals, thank you so much. We're sorry that everybody could not be here in Washington, but we appreciate the continued engagement of all our partners. And to the staff and the team of SETI, thanks again always for your support and engagement on our work on development in the region. Thanks again, and have a good lunch.